Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first Bringing Water to Life webinar of 2018. My name is John Farner with the Irrigation Association. I'd like to thank you for joining us on this Thursday morning/afternoon, depending on where you are in the United States, to talk social media and 10 tips to use social media to promote efficient irrigation. I personally am really excited about hearing what our experts have to say about this issue. I think that this is something that we can all do a better job at doing, not only preaching the gospel that is efficient irrigation, but using all tools available to us that include social media. Before we get to our speakers, I wanted to just go ahead and talk a little bit of housekeeping. And those of you who have participated in our webinars before, at least the Bring Water to Life webinars, you recognize this screen. First of all, the webinar is being recorded, and it's going to be available by visiting irrigation.org/webinar series, basically linking to our YouTube page. So just visit our YouTube page. It's going to be up there, and we'll also link it from that irrigation.org/webinar series. And I'm sure our panelists will be excited to hear. We'll also put it out on social media too after we're done, probably on Monday or Tuesday. We will tweet and Facebook and get that out to everybody. If you have questions during the webinar, I'm really excited about one thing that not all things that our panelists are doing, but one thing our panelists are really trying to do here is have it be a conversation. So rather than hear a presentation and then questions, or presentation and questions, we want this to be a conversation. It will include those of you that are listening on this webinar as much as possible. So if you have a question that pops up during the course of the presentations or the discussions, please type that into your GoToWebinar toolbox. I will have access to those questions, and I will go ahead and ask either Richard or Jim during the presentation. Interrupt them, whatever. It's part of the normal course of conversation. Just bring that question up. So it's a little bit different than what we've done in the past. Finally, the Irrigation Association is providing 0.25 CEUs for this webinar. So just keep record of your attendance. We have all the names that have sat in. If you're participating in this webinar live, we have those of you who have logged in. So just keep record, but we know that you participated. But as always, in case you get that exciting audit letter in the mail from the Irrigation Association on CEUs, so they can know that you attended this webinar or you viewed this webinar, and we'll go ahead and let you know how to record that appropriately. I wanted to just ad-lib real quick here and apologize. I noticed when we started this webinar that we weren't able to fully utilize the listening through the computer mode, that we were focusing mostly on phones. That was a mistake when this webinar was set up, and I profusely apologize. All our future webinars will have the ability to fully participate with audio through your computers as well as phones. So why social media? Social media is something that the Irrigation Association ourselves has been late to the table. I know both of our panelists have had private conversations with me, really pushing the IA to do more and more on social media, and I couldn't agree more. It's part of our overall communications plan, our marketing plan, our public affairs plan. All aspects of communicating all of our message, social media is now a part of that, and it's very important. So whether it's LinkedIn, it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's Instagram, YouTube, whatever, it's ingrained throughout all of our communication efforts, public affairs efforts that we have within the Irrigation Association. And reaching new audiences. I know our panelists are going to talk about who exactly they can reach and why it's called social. The fact that it's called social media means there's the ability to interact with the people that you follow, the people that follow you, etc. And finally, let's face it, we live in a day and age where you control your own message, regardless of anyone's political leanings. We're seeing the use of Twitter pushed to its bounds right now by the President of the United States, getting out his message how he sees fit, no matter what it is, no matter how vetted it is, doesn't matter. He can get that message out without any kind of filter whatsoever that is mainstream media, press releases, etc. So we live in a day and age where social media is being used and used and used on so many levels, and there is an abundance of opportunity for efficient irrigation to get in on this. And because of that, I've asked two of the people that work in this industry who I respect tremendously and who I've personally seen use social media to its greatest effects. So first, Richard Verstuccia with GN Irrigation USA, and then Jim Loria with Maisie Injector Company. Both of these guys have used social media a little bit differently, but very effectively. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to first introduce Richard Restusa. So Richard, hello. And I'm going to go ahead and give the controls over to you. So take it away.
Okay, John, thanks very much for that really nice introduction for both social media and for Jim and myself. So thanks for that. I am really excited to be here today because, as John mentioned, I've been pushing hard for social media growth in our industry for a while now. And the really good news is that I think in the past few years, I'm really starting to see a lot of acceleration. And that in itself is very exciting to me because I think it's going to help the industry as a whole. And I wanted to start off by telling a story that actually happened to me. It's a true story that happened to me a few years ago that really impacted why I wanted to get so involved with social media. And I was driving home from an appointment. I was listening to NPR, and they were telling a story about Abe Hagenston. Honest Abe. Now, this Abe is a homeless guy in Detroit who was a handyman who had his truck and confiscated. And when you have your truck confiscated by the police, you lose your business too. And so there's a dispute as to whether or not that was a legit confiscation or not. But bottom line was Abe lost his business and turned out to be homeless. So Abe's homeless on the streets of Detroit, panhandling for money, just trying to figure out what to do next. So often, as I think I do at times, when somebody asks me for money, what typically I say, and I imagine many of you say it too, I don't have anything on me now. So Abe heard this so many times. He had that objection so many times that he thought, well, I'm going to do something to get over this objection. So he was able to go to a library for free. He was able to use a computer for free. So Abe went to the library, built a website for his panhandling, printed out some cards, and when people said to him, I don't have any money, he would hand them a card and say, you know what, you can go to my website, you can make a donation with your credit card online. And when I heard this, I was just thinking, man, you know how many people in our industry don't have websites or don't have the ability to take a credit card payment, and here's this homeless guy that's showing us, how he's doing it. And so I'm thinking about this as I drive home. And when I get home, I look in my driveway, and sure enough, this is sitting in my driveway. And what you're looking at is the driveway spam that many of us often get. It's a business card in a baggie with some rocks, and it's, call me if you want your landscaping done. And I don't fault anybody for trying to get new business. I really appreciate what they are doing. But I also thought, and I kind of cringed at that point because I thought, man, what is the industry saying? What is our industry saying about our industry? And I've been in this industry almost 20 years now, and I love the industry. And I love the people in it. Talk about a great industry where people help each other, even when they're competitors. This is a wonderful industry to be in, and I think some of the ways we promote it aren't great. And it was funny because I was talking to Brian Horn, the editor of Lawn and Landscape, a few months ago, and he said he went to a high school career night where people were thinking about, with their parents, students were there, and they were talking about what are we going to do in college, what are we going to major in for a career, and he always stands up and talks about a career in landscaping or the landscaping business or the green industry, and he says you can see the parents visibly, squirm in their seats when they think about this because many of them think, this is what you do in order to pay for college to get a good job, and they don't really know the industry, so we're not promoting it as well as we can. And so I think that's really an important change that we have to make. I know I have a gentleman, Alan Nazareth, who works for me, and he's a developer for our website. And he says, nobody in my industry, and he's got friends at Apple, Google, nobody was interested in this industry. And so I started showing him some of the technology and the dashboards for soil moisture or what can be done with a smart controller. And then all of a sudden people were interested. So I think that, getting this technology message out there and showing people through social media is so important. So I had 5 real social media tips this morning. I know Jim's got 5 more, but if you look at the screen now, you'll see recognizable brands. Nobody has to say what any of these companies do for a living or how they do business. You know it and you recognize it right from their brand. So this is what we want to do is build our brands. And so the first thing I think you have to do is you have to make a commitment to social media. And once again, as John mentioned, Jim does it a little differently than I do it. And it's because early on, I sat down with my team and I said, what do we want to really promote? And we thought about, are we looking to get new hires, make product sales, education? What is it that we're trying to do? And then we committed to doing it. And I think that's really key because a lot of people say, well, I kind of, and they take a part-time approach to something, and that's not going to work. You really have to make the commitment. You have to get other people involved and buy into it as well at your companies. And then number two, just like anything else, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I started, this is an old digital scoreboard I started when I first started it at Jane, and it was really important for us to start tracking sessions, what our cloud score was and what our Facebook likes were. So we really use this as a measuring device, and we've got a much more advanced one today. This is, as I mentioned, one of the older ones, but this is a great starting point. And we reviewed it monthly with the team so that we could see if what we were doing was actually getting us our results. Because, probably at the beginning, you're not going to see complete results that you want because it's really hard to get stuff to go viral. There's a lot of competition out there, so you have to start somewhere though, and tracking it is a big key.
Hey, Richard, did you set goals for yourself at all through that process?
Yeah,
numbers, like retweets.
Yeah, we did because fortunately for us, I had seen with Valley Crest when I was working there. I saw what we had done with the Valley Crest blog, and I could see the number of people we were attracting there. So we were able to take a look at that and start to set some goals for ourselves. And once again, early on, going from 500 views a week to 1,000 views a week is pretty easy. It's when you start, moving up. It's like golf, breaking 100's easy at the beginning, but trying to get down in the 80s and 70s is a lot more difficult.
Speak for yourself in the golf, comparison.
Right. So the other thing I just want to mention too is the IA a few years ago. They did a survey of everybody in the association, all the members, and one thing that everybody said, and it beat everything by a lot, was the way they wanted to be communicated with was through email marketing. And when you start to think about it, gathering email addresses and having these email addresses to push information out to, whether it's an advertisement, whether it is a sale, is very easy to do. And we're seeing open rates up in the 30% right now, and I believe that we're seeing, and the industry average or an average would be for manufacturing about 9%. So we're much higher than average, and I'd love to say it's because our content's so great, but I don't think that. I think it's because people in our industry aren't seeing that much, so they're not being overwhelmed with it. So I think that there's an opportunity for email campaigns right now that hasn't existed before, and as you start to look at the numbers, multiplying this out, having the email marketing can really help, and there's some great email marketing software, Constant Contact, MailChimp, that will help you really connect with your users. But more importantly, when you use this software, it tracks who opens what, who clicked on what, and you can always use that information for your salespeople to follow up on. So it's the reports and the tracking that make the Constant Contact or MailChimp so valuable. And for times when somebody does block your email because they don't feel like the content's appropriate, at least Constant Contact or MailChimp is getting blocked. Your company email is not being blocked. So if you remember no tip other than this one, this is a really important one, and that is the engage with people. And, I did this blog a while back, and I will tell you it's probably one of my most successful for engaging with people. We put it on our Facebook page, and we received over 4,000 likes in just over 24 hours. So quizzes are big, and once again, this was a water awareness quiz that asks, basic questions like how many gallons of water does the average person in the U.S. use on a daily basis, and how much of the world, all the questions that we know, a very basic quiz. And man, we got really great engagement from that, and I started to realize, quizzes, things that engage and don't sell, are the things that make a difference, because we know now that 47% of the buyers out there are engaging with your company or with the companies they're buying from, hopefully it's your company, 3 to 5 times some other way than speaking to a salesperson. So they're reading about what they're buying first. They're looking at a review. They're looking what other people are saying 3 to 5 times before they're engaging with a salesperson. So, this is key. What type of engagement are you creating for your brand?
And Richard, this is Jim. Just a quick comment. As far as those kind of quizzes or polls, what I found is that a lot of times you're able to generate more content by the responses you get and by the interest that is elicited in these quizzes and polls. So just another comment to create more engagement even further down the line.
Yeah, I think you're so right, Jim. And I hate to report that basic water awareness quiz, we discovered that, about 63% was the average score of the people who took it. And as I said, I thought it was very basic. It wasn't really hard questions. It wasn't about DU or, anything like that. So it certainly did help us with some other ideas of what type of content people wanted. That's a great point. The other thing I get a lot is how much time do I spend doing this? Some people think I must spend my entire 8 hours of my day behind my computer at my desk, and I just like to mention that my fourth tip is to use tools that make you more productive. And I've been doing this for a while now, and I really have found that Buffer is my favorite social media tool, and I'll tell you why. Buffer for free will allow you to schedule 5 tweets a day, and you can use Buffer for Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. So they'll allow you for free to schedule 5 messages a day. Now, maybe you think that's a lot. On Twitter, I really think that to get any kind of attention, you probably have to be tweeting 5 to 10 times a day. But with Buffer, you get 5 free ones. You can spend $10 a month and pretty much get unlimited use of Buffer. And so what happens there is, we all do the same thing. We read articles online about water management, or we see something that's interesting. And if you tweet as you read it, you're going to send out 5 tweets in your half hour in the morning that you spend reading, or at night, and you're really not going to get good penetration throughout the day. So with Buffer, you get the ability to, when you click the button to buffer the article you're looking at or the article you wrote, it goes into an automatic scheduler that you set the times for. So you can schedule out in a half hour a week's worth of tweets, 50, 60 tweets, and then Buffer has something else called Bulk Buffer that allows you to schedule as many as 100 tweets at a time. So you can look at your analytics from Buffer. You can see your most popular tweets, your most popular posts, and you can then put those into Bulk Buffer and retweet those. And this really helps with engagement, right? Because it's one thing to tweet or to communicate through social media, but the real thing that we're all after is engagement. And so we do want that engagement, and Buffer measures that and shows you what is getting a response and what isn't, and gets that and helps you to rebuffer, the popular things. And then finally, and I think this is so important, and that is to use your social media to promote others. I learned back in my Valley Crest days that this is what really helped us win more business, was promoting others. We did a webcast like this one, talking about a relatively small HOA, 125 homes in Las Vegas, and what we did as far as water management for them. But we didn't focus on Valley Crest. We focused on the customer. and the homeowners association and Seven Hills. And what happened was the New York Times picked up the webcast and reported about it, and reported about Seven Hills and how they were saving water and what they did. And it was such a great marketing piece for our customer that they could use it over and over again. So as we start thinking about how to promote others, the top photo here is an article I wrote about Par 3 Landscape in Las Vegas, who has a great water management program. And, it got the cover of Turf Magazine, and we helped promote this like crazy for them. And certainly, I think I'm building a loyal customer by doing that. But more importantly, I'm helping the industry by getting the word out as to, here's a great way other contractors could reproduce this water management program. Gachina, they landscape in the Bay Area. They built a farm there, and they were giving food from their farm to not a homeless shelter, but people who were down and out, needed some money. At the last IA show, I was noticing what the urban conservation group out of South Florida was doing. And once again, they were very good about not just promoting themselves. You didn't see posts that said, hey, come see us at booth whatever. They were saying more, go see somebody else, right? Helping to promote somebody else is a great way to build that loyalty. So, John, that's my 5 tips that I think are so important that I think that if everybody would just exercise those 5 tips, they'd be really successful in their social media. I'm sure you guys have some questions.
Yeah, so there was one question that was posted, and if anybody has any questions, please type them in. And the question is, do you think case studies work well for social media content, or do you find they're too long and lose readers' interest?
Mm-hmm. I really like case studies, and I've had a lot of success with case studies. I think the key to case studies is to keep them at a very digestible length. And I always shoot for, best case, a 3-paragraph case study. The first paragraph, identifying what the issue was. The second paragraph, what actions you took or what actions your customer took to remedy the issue. And then the third paragraph, the result. And, I've also been a part of 3- and 4-page case studies, and I think in certain circumstances, those are appropriate. But if you hit the bullets and you spread them around your customer base or your industry or your different market groups, then I think you'll be successful and you'll be better off. And the people you do the case studies about, they love the publicity as well.
Yeah, John, one of the ways I do the case studies is I kind of tie it to a trend, and I do the blog post on that trend, and then I have a link in that to the case study if people want to learn more about, the actual facts and, what happened, solutions, and so on. So it's a good way using social media to get people to a more technical approach to a case study.
Another question that was asked, when tracking social media, what analytics are you recording? Which analytic is most valuable?
Yeah, so, I really think that, I take a hub and spoke approach to social media. And what I mean by that is I can't really provide all the information I want to provide on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. What I want to do is I want to use those channels to drive engagement on my website. So first and foremost, and Google does this so well, is I spend time every day in Google Analytics, and I look at a couple things in there every day. And one is, how many people visited the website today? Number 2, what are they looking at? What are they actually viewing? Because this is going to tell me, if I wrote a blog post about a new technology and I get a ton of looks at that post and I start to see it circulate, I know that this is an important technology. If people aren't interested, it's also telling me something about that technology. So Google Analytics is great because you can deep dive so well into that, and the analytics are so readily available, and they're easy to screenshot graphs and data, And so Google Analytics to see how many people are coming to visit my website and what they're looking at, that's really the number one. This is also the way I measure all the digital media because, once again, I'm using those as spokes to the hub, and the hub's the website.
Yeah, John, and also I'll talk about analytics as well, but
Great.
One of the things we have to recognize is that, the numbers are important, how many opens, how many comments, how many likes, but just remember that, sometimes it's only takes one person. I wrote a blog post that had pretty low analytics one time, but the person that was most interested was the head of the EPA at the time, Lisa Jackson. And so just that one person gave me an opening to get into the EPA and talk about, the things I wanted to talk about as our company had provided the solutions for. So, sometimes it's not just all about the numbers. It's if you get to that one person you really want to attract, it's worth that post.
So I want to ask Jim a question now, if I could, because I know one thing he's really good at is he takes very popular issues and turns them into, or doesn't turn them into, but relates them to what's happening in water, right? You had that's a large part of my presentation, Richard. So if you hold that question, I'll get into that once I get started.
Let me get two more questions in, and move over to Jim's presentation. Is that cool?
Right. Sure, that's great.
Yeah,
one of them is my question, and then we have one that was just typed in. So my question may be specific to Twitter and maybe Instagram, but Richard, what is there like a best practice you follow when it comes to following others in social media? Like I agree with you 100%, everything you said with tracking and posting and how to engage. But then this whole other concept of who to follow. And is there any strategery, as George W. Bush would say, behind that?
Yeah, absolutely, John. That's one thing. If you're in our industry and you're not on Instagram right now, and Instagram is something that 2 years ago I wouldn't have even talked about. 2 years ago I wouldn't have even brought it up. I don't think anybody would, but our industry is so visual. So if you start looking at Instagram, Instagram gives people the ability to hashtag, maybe one of your products. If you look at hashtag Octobubbler on Instagram, you're going to see a lot of Jane Octobubblers on Instagram and photos and people talking about it. So one thing that one of our team members did, Michael Derwenko, is he started looking at who was looking at the hashtag Octobubbler and then contacting them and just saying, hey, following them, and then and once he followed them, he was able to engage with them with a direct message and say, hey, I happen to work for Jane. If you have any questions about Octobubblers, let me know. So it was a really passive, easy connection. That's somebody he followed, somebody who was using our product. And we started to track the leads he was getting by doing this. And, in social media, everybody's saying today, what's the ROI on this? Well, we actually are tracking, and we're measuring on a monthly basis how many sales we're getting by doing that. So who do I follow? I follow people that are using our product. I follow people that have an interest in sustainability or water management or anything about interest, and I can just hashtag that interest that pertains to me or James' business, and that's where I start to look at who I want to follow.
Perfect. So Clark Webb, you typed in a message. I'm going to save that question to the end because I think it's a perfect question to ask at the very end of the webinar. So Jim, thank you, Richard. I'm going to go ahead and give the controls over to you now, okay. Jim, and Richard, don't go away anywhere because you're not done yet. So
you're right here. I'm interested in hearing what Jim has to say as much as anybody else.
All right. Take it away, Jim.
Okay, thanks. Can you see my screen, everybody?
Looks good.
Okay, good. So as Richard and John said, I do it a little bit differently than what Richard does. I've concentrated on LinkedIn. And the reason I concentrated on LinkedIn is a number of reasons. Why I've looked at that as a good platform to blog about the value of water. So first of all, there's 400 million members around the world. You can see the map there and where they're concentrated. Obviously, the United States is number one. There's 100 million active users on LinkedIn, so quite a good amount of people looking at what's going on. There's 1 million specialty groups, and I'll talk a little bit more about the specialty groups. And then it's pretty much rated the #1 business social networking site. And the fact that it was bought by Microsoft a few years ago, I can't really say that's better or worse, but from my perspective, it's still operating the same as when it was an independent entity. Reasons why I like LinkedIn: you can have it anywhere, anytime, on your mobile, your phone, your iPhone, your Samsung phone, your tablet, your computer, anytime, anywhere. So it's always open. A little while back, I wanted to see how I could use it more effectively. So I saw there was an interview with Reid Hoffman, an internet entrepreneur. He's the co-founder and executive chairman of LinkedIn. And he said that he saw it being used in a number of different ways, that you could connect to the central nodes in any given network, meaning any type of organization. You can be part of the information flow, and I thought that was pretty important. And then it's a really good place to publish your ideas. So for those reasons, again, I looked at LinkedIn as a really valuable tool, a really valuable platform. And at this point, I'd like to make the difference between how I see LinkedIn and Facebook. And so I've always looked at it as LinkedIn is kind of like a backyard barbecue. You'd show up wearing your Tom Brady jersey, your New York Yankee hat, probably bring your spouse, your kids, maybe even your dog, have a couple of beers. Whereas I look at LinkedIn as more as a business lunch. You wouldn't bring your spouse. You dress more appropriately than you'd probably dress for a backyard barbecue. So I like to keep those in mind. Important aspects of a LinkedIn profile: your photo, professional photo, your headline, and that's not necessarily your title, but how you want the industry to perceive yourself. You want to tell an authentic story about yourself and how you're involved in business. And important part is your unique value proposition. What do you want people to know about you and how you're related to your particular industry, in our case, the water industry? And then it's really good to have 3+ recommendations. What are people in the industry saying about you that you want people to know about? And as Seth Godin says, you're trying in LinkedIn to build a tribe. Send and accept invitations. Connect with subject matter experts, which is really important, something that Richard talked about. And then you can join LinkedIn groups, and that's a good way to get conversations going. So I put a couple of LinkedIn groups up here. You can see the Irrigation Association is right in the middle of things. There's a lot of other ones around agriculture. There's some on landscaping that you can join. You can join up to 50 groups. You can actually own a group, but if you do own the group, then you have the responsibility to moderate, and that's no small task, making sure the conversations are kept appropriate. And then you can engage like minds. You can comment, you can like, you can share, you can start a discussion, you can do a poll. We talked a little bit about Richard's quiz. I started a poll back a number of years ago, and it became the source of some really good information that allowed me to generate some really good content over the course of the next several months. And I like to call what you're doing when you're writing on LinkedIn. And I do a lot less than Richard does. Richard's talking 5 tweets a day. I probably write 1 blog post a month. And it's more extensive. It's a little longer in form. And I'll talk a little bit more about where I get my ideas. But you're almost becoming a reporter for your industry. And you really need to do your research on that. So a couple of places where I find good information is I look at what's being written in the books about water. And if you look at the titles of these books, it's a pretty grim industry. You got the Big Thirst, Unquenchable, The Blue Death, Last Oasis, when rivers run dry, running out of water. So we've got a lot to talk about, and we really want to make sure people understand the value of water. So that's one of the reasons I write about it. Other places to look for conversations, Richard talked about it, industry events. Whenever I go to the IA, I look for stories that I can write about, what's going on, trade organizations, what they're saying, and then the media. And other places I like to look at, find good sources of content, what I call hydroluminaries, the people that really understand water and talk about water and are in the focus of water. I'm fortunate to work for Maisie. Angelo Maisie is somebody I consider a hydroluminary. Richard, I think you've got somebody in Chris Nightingale who I would consider, based on what he's written about and what he's done. He's a hydroluminary, and I really appreciated your interview with him a while back on his bringing corn to harvest. That was quite fascinating and really opened my eyes about farming. It's quite good. Other places, industry events. World Soil Day was last year, so I thought it would be a good idea to write about soil and its connection to water. I've written about things on the 4th of July. Usually on World Water Day, I'll write a post. I've written about women in water on Valentine's Day, so that gives me a good source of finding places to write about. News stories. I mean, everybody's heard about the cannabis market and how it's exploding. And so I wrote an article last year about why California's cannabis industry will lead water innovation. And then hot topics. And one of my more recent posts was about Leonardo da Vinci and what his lifelong love affair with water can teach us about the subject. So hot topics, I kind of walk around and just think about how is something related to water. It could be movies, could be books, could be a TV show, could be a song, anything that kind of spurs my interest. One of the ways I've also used LinkedIn for this type of application, we talked a little bit about how I use it for case studies, is when I write a technical article, I sometimes promote it through a LinkedIn piece where it's more of just a general trend. So it helps my partners, my writing partners, Irrigation Today, the Irrigation Association's fairly new periodical, which I used in a LinkedIn post, and then Irrigazette International was another one that I did on soil. So a couple of tips that I'd have to say is, LinkedIn has really allowed me to broadcast to my network. I can get out the word. I can see some of the people. One of the questions that was asked is, how do you connect with people? Well, in LinkedIn, you can see who are the real thought leaders by just seeing how many of those particular people that you're linked to are also linked to other people. So if I want to get the word out, I'll look at somebody that's got over 1,000 mutual connections to me, and I'll see that, well, they're pretty connected as well. And then as far as selling, I also would say that one of the key things that you want to not do on these kind of, and Richard talked about it a bit, is you're not trying to sell anybody. I mean, I've tried it, and it doesn't work. So the key thing is to remember that you're trying to build credibility as someone that understands your field, and not trying to promote either your products, your services, or anything else, because number one, people don't want to know about it. They want to connect with you based on what your credibility is and how you're promoting your ideas in the marketplace. And the other thing I'd say, if you're going to write, you're going to get comments, and not all of them are going to be favorable. So if you get some unfavorable comments, don't take it personally. I've been called everything from an anti-green pro-business hack to an uninformed environmentalist, and that was for the same blog post. so if you're speaking out, you're going to get some comments, and as I said, not all of them are going to be favorable. And I please take up the challenge. You know, in our profession, we really need more people speaking out about the value of water, and we need to let the public know. And I know Richard's main goal is to do that. My main goal is to do that. So please take up the challenge and write about it. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect with you. We've got 60 people on. I'd love to see that the number of people that are on this webinar who aren't already connected with me would be interested in connecting with me on LinkedIn. So thank you very much.
Hey, Jim, this is Richard. I've got a question about connecting, and it's funny. I wrote this question a little while ago because I wanted to ask you, and it seems like the perfect time right now. What is your philosophy on connecting with somebody? When somebody asks to connect, what's your philosophy?
Yeah, so I try and be favorable about it. So I'll look at their LinkedIn profile, and I'll see who they are, what company they work for, who are they connected to. So if they're connected to 150 people that I'm already connected to, that's a pretty good indication that they're worthwhile connecting to and that they're not just looking to sell me. I mean, I have been fooled sometimes. People want to connect, and then the next thing you know, I agree, and they're sending me a message that, hey, they've got this great product, and can I help them market it? But I do kind of a little bit of a due diligence. I'm inclined to connect with a lot of people. I'm almost up to 5,000 LinkedIn connections. I think I'm about 30 people short. So maybe if some people connect with me on this webinar, I'll get to my 5,000 goal. But for the most part, I'm pretty agreeable. But, I have been burned in the past, and I do some due diligence on the people before I do connect with them.
Yeah, that's great. In the old days, it used to be if you wouldn't recommend them, don't connect with them. And now we've dropped that, and I agree. I'm connecting with a lot of people. Do you pay for the premium LinkedIn?
I do not. I think the paid, I'm getting to the point where they're telling me that I can't do as many searches as I can, but I don't know. At this point in time, I haven't paid for it, and I don't know if it's really worthwhile. I know recruiters use it quite a bit. I'll have to make a decision coming up here, I think in the next several months, whether I should or not. But at this point in time, and I think for a general user, I don't really think you need to pay for it.
Yeah. And with all your connections, Jim, how many people a week or a month contact you through LinkedIn and say, hey, will you introduce me to so-and-so?
I get some of that. I don't get quite that many people wanting me to do the connection thing. I do get messages. I also put out little missives here and there as updates. Or if I see something that I like, I've done it with Chris. I know Chris Nightingale, where he's put something out and I'll update it and he'll send it out. So that's more the connectivity than really. I'm on it every day, and so I manage it. I look at what people are doing on it. It's a really good tool if where it comes in with what you just asked about recommending introductions. I've used it where we've interviewed some salespeople, and I went on LinkedIn and I looked them up and I saw who they were connected to, and I did kind of a reference check based on who they knew and I knew. So for that, it's really good. Reference checking for looking at potential candidates, I find is very valuable.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because like you, very few people, and I don't have as many LinkedIn connections as you do, but very few people ever ask me for an introduction. Of all the people who have ever asked me for an introduction, if I actually could make the introduction, I would say 100% of the time I've done it. And I think this is one of the most valuable unused tools in LinkedIn. I think I think this is something we can all use better for everyone's gain. And then the other thing that's amazing to me, Jim, is when, whether it's a interview, whether you're looking at a candidate, or I'm going to make a sales presentation, or somebody's presenting to me, I'm Googling that person. I'm looking at their LinkedIn before, and man, if that person's asking me questions about my company or me that they could have easily researched, and I know they didn't do their homework, then the probability of them getting that sale is probably less. And so,
yeah, no, you're exactly right, Richard. I've done that a number of times with candidates. One example, and this is a really good benefit of it. That Leonardo da Vinci piece I sent out to a lot of my connections, and I ended up getting an invitation to lunch by a potential customer that could mean a tremendous amount of business for Maisie. And it was just the discussion of how Leonardo da Vinci can give us lessons about water. Nothing to do with Maisie, didn't even mention Maisie, but now we're in conversations about some potentially big business opportunities.
So, Jim, how hard is it? I'm sorry, John. How hard is it?
No. Go. Hey, keep going.
Yeah. How hard is it to get stuff published on LinkedIn? I mean, what are the steps you have to take to have that happen?
Oh, it's simple. You write it, and there's a tab that says publish. Publish your ideas, articles it's under, and you just publish it. And that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the other things I really like about LinkedIn is that you own the content. So I've taken that content and I've published in other places. I published it on Water Online. I published in the Water Network. So, whenever you publish something, a lot of times when you publish it, they own the content. But LinkedIn, you own the content. And so you want to publish it anywhere else, it's all yours.
So I have a quick question. Excuse me.
Sure.
Jim, I love your presence on LinkedIn, and I'm trying to combine it with some of the top highlights from Richard's presentation. And I think we've gone back and forth from having a personal presence in social media and a company presence in social media. I think both are important, but can you guys talk about that balance that you walk between, I think, Richard, your H2O Trends, as well as Jane Irrigation USA. So what is that balance? How do you work that out?
Yeah. Yeah, both on Twitter. We have Jane's USA, and I've got H2O Trends, which is me personally, and I do manage both. We have a LinkedIn page for the company as well, as do a lot of the other companies. So, I think they're both very similar approaches, promoting the efficient use of water and water savings. Some are more company centric, some are more personal centric, and I know we have. So I have responsibility for some of the pages, and then we also have other people that work at Jane who have responsibility for like Instagram and things like that. And the Instagram is a Jane page, not a personal. So we try to manage this best we can, and the key is to really be promoting the philosophies and the business practices of your company on the company pages. And this is sometimes tricky. I remember when I started the blog at Valley Crest, and somebody had said to me, "Why do you want to do that? You're just going to end up writing something that gets you fired." And this is a big concern, right? I teach a class at Water Smart Innovations, and we had public agencies starting blogs and doing social media, and everybody wanted to know what the oversight was on this. How do you not get in trouble? Instead of how to make this as a positive, everybody was playing defense. But I think most people, and I run in and I hear very few stories of people getting in trouble. I think they know the rules. I think they use rules of common sense, and especially when you're representing your company, it's definitely worth conversations. It's definitely worth reviews. Where do you think, if you're a supervisor or a CEO, where do you think that maybe the limits have been pushed, so that that person knows where the lines are and they don't cross it? Because everybody's got their own ideas on that, and every company has their own philosophy on that. So that's a really important conversation to have and take.
Yeah, John, I echo the same thing as Richard, because when I first started doing this, I had joined Maisie, and I'd done it before in other companies I worked for, and it worked very well. But I wanted to be sensitive to Angelo and to the CEO of the company. So initially, I was sending them and getting approval on every blog. Not that I felt there was anything really sensitive, but just that they saw my writing style and how I approached things.
Yeah.
And as time went on, they felt comfortable. And if there is any time when I think there's a sensitive topic, I'll run it by my marketing manager, or I'll run it by Angelo himself. So you have to be careful. I mean, you're representing the company.
And LinkedIn is a very well, when people think of LinkedIn, they think of job searching. I'm going to network for a new job. You've
Right.
taken LinkedIn to a whole new level in many people's eyes, and you're putting yourself out there too. It's not the Maisie brand; it's the Jim Lauria brand out there, which is kind of scary for some people to go out on that limb, especially in a professional networking world that is LinkedIn.
So,
Right,
John,
right. And that's a good thing. And for me, I think it's a good thing. And for Maisie, it's a good thing. I mean, it's something that the people at Maisie, Angelo, the CEO, everybody sees that with me being out there, there's a better connection to a lot of people, even my sales team. My sales team says, hey, can you get me access to this person or that person? And I've been able to do it.
Yeah. And John, this is Richard. This is the other thing that I see that I think is so important about LinkedIn and other places like this is, even if you're working for a company but you have no formal responsibility to write articles or to tweet or post something on Facebook, if you do join some groups in LinkedIn, if you do follow some people in the industry, and you simply just make comments, especially positive comments of what people are doing, that you will build your own individual brand in the industry without having to do anything except learn what's happening in your industry by reading these things and making comments on it, and constructive comments or additional information that makes the content even more powerful. Then so this is something everybody can do without, formal responsibility from their companies.
Right. So and without, the efforts of writing. I mean, people look at it as a daunting task. And Rich and I have talked about this. We both love to write. We both love to express our ideas. But I think he hit a really key point that you don't have to be a writer to really be engaged in LinkedIn or the other social media tools. Commenting, liking, it's all good.
So there's 8 minutes left, and there's 2 questions I want to get to. One of them, so say you represent multiple groups. So what do you? This person is works for a management company that manages multi associations. So do you have any suggestions on what to do when you represent those multiple clients, with each client having a separate company page or group? Any suggestions there?
Well, I would say that the content should come from the organization. I'm assuming a trade organization, John. Is that kind of what you were looking at?
Yep.
Well, I would tap into the organizations and get their sense. Maybe some are more interested in getting their word out than others. So, and then it is a little tricky because that person has a LinkedIn page and they're going to be writing about things. But I would say separate the two out and get a LinkedIn page for each organization, or at least the organization that wanted to use LinkedIn as a tool to communicate to members.
I think that's a great suggestion, Jim. And the other thing I would be doing is Google searches on a automated basis, so that I was getting feeds into my email every day about the separate industries I was following, so I could stay up to date on the most important news articles, and then I would be tweeting those or posting them on Facebook, the appropriate article to the appropriate association. So I think you're going to have to look at it as different interests and make sure you go specific to those different interests.
So the last question, I think it's a great question, and I'm going to read it verbatim. For an irrigation water management company with no social media exposure currently, what platform would you use to get started?
So this is Richard, and I say no social media. I'm going to assume they have a website. And so I think that if I'm a water management company, I want to drive sales to my website or to my door, the first thing I'm going to get on in my localized area is Facebook, because I can start to advertise my services to people who have those interests in a very cost-efficient manner, $5 a day, $10 a day, and I'm going to get instant business from that. Jim?
And then I would say, obviously I'm a LinkedIn fan, so I would say get started on LinkedIn. Have somebody in the organization. I would suspect that there's somebody in their organization that's already on LinkedIn, and get them started. Who are they connected to, and start to build from there. Just connections. Join some groups. It's an irrigation management company. The first irrigation group I joined is the Irrigation Association group. So that's kind of where I would start.
And that group, we have, I believe, 13,000 members in that group, and anybody can be a member of that group. We went through a lot of internal. This is kind of inside baseball here. We as the IA went through a lot of internal discussions on what to do with that group, because we had a combination of folks like you, international members of LinkedIn, and I would say well over half are not members of the Irrigation Association. So here we have this group, and it's like, what do? We don't deny anybody entry. There's really, the conversations for the most part stay on, on task with what they're relevant. So we just embraced it. We embraced the non-members in there to try to get the IA message out there, and our mission was to promote efficient irrigation. So that's been quite useful for us.
Absolutely. And just think about it. All 13,000 of those members have the ability to post in that group daily if they want.
Right.
And that post will go out in an email alert to all 13,000 members of the group. Yep. It is what a great way to communicate.
And as the administrator, we have the ability to push out once a week to land in their email inboxes our post to that group.
And we should probably post the archived webinar, this archived webinar into that group, right, John?
Yeah. So there's one more question that popped up, and we've dabbled in this before, but it's Richard, how often do you boost posts with or place paid ads on Facebook?
So
do you ever do that at all?
Yeah, we boost every blog I write, and I do a weekly, or somebody else at the company contributes now as well. So we have other contributors, but we write and post weekly, and we do boost those posts on Facebook. We rarely spend more than $20, and we get a lot of connection from that. You'll connect with a couple thousand more people than we normally would just by spending $20. Jim was mentioning that great article about Chris and the corn harvest and behind the scenes of a corn harvest. We spent a little bit more money on that one because we thought it was a particularly, good subject matter that would be good for more people than just industry people to read and be interested in. So, but usually we spend $10 to $20, no more than 50, and it attracts a few thousand more people than we would normally get.
Yeah, it's relatively cheap. The times that we've done at the Irrigation Association, it's been relatively cheap, and we've gotten some good exposure out of it.
Yeah, and if you're in business, you can guide your Facebook posts towards, and you can use anybody who has liked your competition. You can push it right to them. I mean, it's really a good aggressive tool.
Yeah. Good. Well, guys, we are at the top of the hour. I want to thank both of you very much. That was a lot of fun as well as interesting, which is we don't often get both of those together. So I really appreciate that. For anyone who attended, I really appreciate you spending an hour out of your day with us. Like I said, this is being recorded. We'll get it all cleaned up and pushed out on our social media sites. here in the next few days. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please contact me or our panelists. We'd be more than happy to get back to you, or find us on any of the social media platforms that were discussed. I'm sure that'd be fine too. And like I said, I apologize for that audio glitch. We'll be sure to get those fixed for our future webinars. And we are having some more webinars. I think there are 6 total in this spring series. Our next one is next week. We have our good friend who's also on social media, Warren Gorwitz, talking about sustainability and landscape irrigation, which should be very good as well. All those webinars can be found at irrigation.org/webinar_series. Richard and Jim, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
John and Jim, thank you. And thanks for everything the IA is doing right now. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Thank you.
Bye now.